Hello, everyone. I can see that we have quite a few people on already. So welcome, and we're going to start right on time as Laura and Janet were making sure that we did. Again, my name is Dominic Chappellet, but before I get started on my part of things, I wanted to introduce Janet Fletcher to get us going with the wine and cheese pairing today for Cheese O'Clock. So Janet, let us have it.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Cheese O'Clock, a series of virtual cheese and wine tastings that Laura Werland and I started a year ago now to celebrate American Cheese Month. And here we are 12 months later, and it's American Cheese Month again. So our theme tonight is something old, new, borrowed, and blue. And we're going to let you imagine which cheese might be which, but over the course of the next hour, you're going to figure out what we were thinking when we came up with that theme. I am here in my Napa Valley kitchen, and I am the author of several books on cheese. I publish the Planet Cheese blog, and these days do a lot of virtual cheese hosting, but hope to get back to in-person teaching very soon. And I am joined by my cheese colleague, Laura Werland, by Willie Bridgham of Four Fat Fowl Cheese, and as you just heard, by Dominic Chappellet of Chappellet Winery. So we have a great program for you tonight, and to get it started, I'd like to turn it over to Laura.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Laura Werland, and like Janet, I am a cheese educator, author, and leader of virtual tastings as well as in-person ones too. And like Janet, I too am looking forward to getting back out there. Actually, I have gotten back out there a little bit, and I'm looking forward to a whole lot more. It's really nice to just be talking to people outside of a screen, but it's also great to be talking in front of a screen, because I don't know about you, but sometimes it's just nice to be home and enjoy your cheeses and wines all to yourself, which I do. Thank you very much. Anyway, so Cheese O'Clock, for those of you who have not attended before, is a series of what we're having today, cheeses and wines, and a guest cheesemaker, a guest winemaker, and Janet and me. And we started it last year, May, as a celebration of American Cheese Month. Here we are again, American Cheese Month. And that's why we have all American cheeses and, of course, great American wines to go with it. And we have also 2 more weeks of Cheese O'Clock. We've already had 1 week, and all 4 of the collections this week, because I know you're going to love the cheeses so much, and you're going to love the wine so much, you're going to want to order it all again. You can order all the collections are available on iGourmet, and the recordings for today and the next 2 weeks will be available also. So if you miss it or can't make it at 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock or in between on a Thursday, you can get that. Now, the last thing I want to say right now is I encourage you all to take pictures of your cheese party. You can even take a little selfie like this, and showing your cheese board and the wines and everything else, and post it on social media, which is janetfletchernv.com. There you go. Yeah, awesome, Dominic. There you go. I'm taking a picture too. Anyway, Janet Fletcher NV, as in Napa Valley, is her Instagram. Mine is Cheese Lady with a Z. And let's see, Four Fat Fowls, at Four Fat Fowls, plural, and at Chappellet Winery are the 4 social handles. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Janet.
Thanks, Laura. And I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing our wine guest, Dominic Chappellet of Chappellet Winery. Dominic, I've known your mom for a while, and I'm one of her many hundreds of thousands of fans. And your family is just so renowned in the Napa Valley. I have to say, speaking as a resident of Napa Valley, that I'm just so happy that your winery is now in the 2nd generation, which you represent, and that it has stayed in family hands. Dominic is in charge of national sales and a lot of the marketing programs. And he was born the year after his parents started the winery. So he really has grown up as Chappellet, and he is going to introduce us to the 2 wines that we're going to be tasting tonight.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for the nice intro. We're glad to be here as 2nd generation winery owners and stewards which is really what I think of it as. You know, we don't make wine without an amazing place to do it, and we get to be the stewards of an incredible piece of property. I want to start by just saying, if you aren't already enjoying wine, you should be. So, I mean, I have some in my glass. I think we've all got glass going. So cheers, welcome. I'm going to have a sip, and you know, the cheese will come. So as I give you a little bit of background about Chappellet, and then I'll talk a little bit about the wines, and then we'll get right into the meat of everything. Be enjoying the wines. So I think I'm going to start by sharing my screen and giving you a little visual of the start of Chappellet and then what we look like now. So we'll go there right now, and hopefully this works. We've done some practice. And so does everybody see what we have going on? Perfect. So that's my mother and father back in 1968, which was the year that they built the winery. And actually, you wouldn't know it now, but it was the year they built me too. I think that, you know, I was probably on my way at that point, early in the beginning stages, but I wasn't yet part of the group. My parents came from Los Angeles with a few kids in tow. And so my brothers and sisters are there. And by this time I had arrived, and I'm there on my oldest sister Lija's knee, being put right out to work in the vineyard because they didn't have a lot of people to help out in those early years. But, you know, they found an incredible piece of property. And this is what my parents saw from what became their home when they first bought this piece of property. There weren't quite as many vineyards there, but most of these, you know, most of this area here that you're looking at had been planted. And they got directed to this amazing place by a man named Andre Chelichev, who told my father, you know, the type of wines you want to make, I think you'd be well served in looking for hillside vineyards. And again, this was the first property that they saw, and they fell in love with it immediately. And I think you can see why. So that's a quick, very quick introduction to Chappellet and where we are and what we think makes this place special. And now I will get into the wines. We've got two wines that we're sharing with you today. One is a Viognier, this lovely white wine here. Thank you, Laura. That's what the bottle looks like. This wine is actually one that we sourced the fruit from over in Sonoma, and it's a Cold Creek vineyard owned by the Laird family. And, you know, Viognier is not something that's going to do well as a variety up on Pritchard Hill. It wants a little bit different climate. And we sort of stumbled across this vineyard. We weren't planning on making a Viognier, but really our vineyard manager and winemaker, when they were looking at some other vineyards that we were buying some fruit from, said, you know, that looks like a really interesting vineyard. And I know that's a Laird property. Can we go check that out? And they did, and they found out there was Viognier, and they sort of came back to us and said, this might be really fun. So we jumped on that, as we usually do when our winemaker and vineyard manager get together and you know, present something to us, because they usually do it for a good reason. So this Viognier is going to be spectacular with these cheeses. And I'm not going to go into right now the pairings, because I think you two ladies have picked these for the pairings. And I want you to tell us about why, you know, these cheeses are going to enhance the wine and vice versa. And then I always love when we get some chat and people's own reflection on what they're tasting and what they're experiencing with the wines and the cheese. So hopefully we'll get you to be part of this with us. And then we have this, you know, light colored red wine. As you can see, it is not light colored. This is a deep, dark, mysterious, beautiful red wine that we refer to as our Las Piedras, which means the rocks or the boulders. And up on Pritchard Hill, if you get to visit us, if you haven't visited us, you don't know specifically, but if you get a chance to come up here, you will very quickly see rocks, boulders. That is what happens every time that we go to replant or plant a vineyard. We pull-up rocks. And that's just what this property is made of. And so it seemed appropriate that this wine, which is a smattering of different varieties from around the property, Bordeaux varieties. All 5 Bordeaux varieties tend to make it into this wine. So this particular vintage, I like to use my notes, my cheat notes for this, because our winemaker said it was okay, because he says he can never remember the specific percentages on any particular vintage either. So I'm using my cheat notes. It's 59% Cabernet Sauvignon, 18% Malbec, 8% Merlot, 8% Cabernet Franc, and 7% Petit Verdot. It's a wine that is made right after we have made the sort of the pinnacle of our portfolio, Cabernet Sauvignon, that we call our Pritchard Hill Estate Vineyards Cabernet. And what's happened then is we've set aside all of the best from the vineyard to make that Cabernet. But after we come up with the blend, there's little bits and pieces of that best of the best. And that's when our winemaker really gets to play. He said, well, I don't have to call this anything. I don't have to call it Cabernet or Merlot. I can just play and get excited about, what we could combine in the best form. So that's really what this is. And again, it's just a red wine called Las Piedras. It's a Bordeaux blend, and it's spectacular, and I hope you enjoy it. So that's the initial run up for me. I did want to just, if I could just take a second, as you were coming on, I saw that there was a few people that have been with us before. Susan and Eric, you're with us all the time, so thank you for being out there. Brian Apple from Beverly Hills, Richard and Lisa, and many, many more who are out there, have been part of our webinars in the past over this last year and more. Thank you all for being part of it. And I'm excited to get into the cheeses, and we'll talk some more and answer some questions as we go on.
All right.
Perfect.
Oh, I guess it's up to me. Sorry.
Yeah, Laura.
I was so listening to what you were saying. I'm like, oh, do we
I
have
forgot to lead you in. I figured you'd just catch on.
Well, I just want to tell everybody, for anyone who is not familiar with Chappellet, that first of all, it is one of the most special wineries in America. I think that's an objective, not subjective statement. I really do. And I think for those of you who maybe don't have the wines tonight, I hope you'll get them, because they really are special. So with that, I just want to say, so this other person sitting on the screen here, well, sitting down, but on the screen, is Willie Bridgham, who we will get to more of, but Willie is our guest cheesemaker from Four Fat Fowl in New York. And I didn't want you to think that he somehow snuck into this discussion. And so anyway, that is who that is. And I also wanted to remind everybody that to please use the chat and the Q&A. Janet and Dominic and I and Willie can see all of that. Let's see, I already mentioned that we have more Cheese O'Clock collections available. So I think with that, I'm just going to go to you, Janet, to start with the cheeses.
All right, we get to eat. All right. First up is California cheese from Sonoma County, from Bellwether Farms.
Okay.
It's like this. It's Carmody, C-A-R-M-O-D-Y, for those of you who don't have it. It's made with Jersey cow's milk. And you can, this color on my screen is not very good, but this cheese is yellow, and that's from that Jersey cow's milk, from those cows on grass. And it's a beautiful piece of cheese with a natural rind. There's a little bit of a coating on this rind. It's what cheesemakers call plastic coat, or it's food grade. You can eat it, but you don't have to. So you cut the rind away if you like. And this Bellwether, this is our borrowed cheese. We're starting with our borrowed cheese, and there's a reason I'm saying that it's borrowed, because the cheesemaker, Liam Callahan, and his mother, who started the creamery about 1995 or so, they were in Italy, learning to make cheese, learning to make different kinds of cheese, and looking at what the Italians were doing. And they were in northern Italy, in the area where they make gorgonzola. And they were visiting a gorgonzola producer, Actually, the wheels were in a cave somewhere else, so there wasn't even any gorgonzola for them to taste. So the cheesemaker brought out a kind of a simple toma, Toma, which is an Italian generic word, like the French tome with two M's. It just kind of means this is the local everyday cheese, a toma. And Liam Callahan and his mother from Bellwether loved this toma. And they came home, they had no idea how to make it because they hadn't seen it being made. And Liam started playing around and he had to use his existing equipment. He didn't have a press, a cheese press, so this is not a pressed cheese. He didn't have the kind of kettle that you can heat. So with a jacket, it's a steam jacket. So he couldn't make a cooked curd cheese. So this is not cooked. It's not pressed. It's very open. You can see, some openings in the texture. And he just tried to get something similar to that Italian toma. So it's about less than 2 months old, somewhere between a month and 2 months old. And it's just meant to be, Liam would say, let me see if I can get his quote. Well, basically he was saying he was trying to make something that just tasted it, that showed off the good quality of their milk, that just was buttery and milky. It's not meant to be a fancy cheese, it's just meant to be a kind of an everyday snacking cheese. So it's a great place for us to start. And let's taste it. I think you're going to pick up, first of all, that kind of buttery, milky taste, and also a tang, like a sour cream kind of tang, which comes from the culture. And it also comes from the fact that this cheese, according to Liam, that this cheese, because it's not pressed, it was never pressed, it had, in the early days, more whey in it than a cheese that had been pressed. So there's more lactose for the culture to work on. So you get more tang in this kind of cheese when you don't press it. Buttery sour cream. Just that kind of lactic milk smell.
It is so good.
Yeah, it's really delicious.
I've been pretending to just taste it, but I'm just inhaling it, really.
But I like to pause and smell before I taste and try to think, what am I smelling? And then once you get it in your mouth, you're going to smell a lot more. But I'm getting perfect salt, and that's this because it does have some age on it. I'm guessing this is closer to 2 months than. I'm guessing it's closer to at least 2 months old.
I think so too. Janet, someone wants to know, isn't all cheese cooked?
No, raw milk cheeses are not cooked. Raw milk cheeses are made with the milk. The temperature comes out of the animal, body temperature. And the definition of raw milk is that they are not cooked. But the phrase cooked is a little misleading because, and Willie can talk about this when we get to his cheese. I initially imagined when people talked about a cooked curd cheese that they were really heating it up, but it's very, very low. The heating is pretty low temperature, but heating a cheese is a way of getting the curds to tighten up and release more whey. And that's what you do if you're trying to make a firmer cheese. But as we said, they don't do it with this Bellwether. And so you get more of that kind of lactic tang, which I think is so delicious.
Yeah. So Dominic, have you had a chance to taste it with your wines, and what do you think?
I think it's actually a really perfect pairing. So this wine has a lot of, it's got a definite acid backbone, but it's got a lot of fruit characteristics up front. So sort of tropical fruit. I seem to have gone blurry, but anyway, that'll get fixed, I'm sure, in a minute. Yeah, so, in tasting this simple Toma type cheese, as you say, it really complements it beautifully. The milk quality, that sort of milky, what you were talking about, the lactic acid, it actually is sort of fun to have with this wine because this wine does not go through a secondary malolactic fermentation. And so you you add a little bit of that milkiness with the wine, and it's a fun component that sort of helps to round out the wine. It's a lovely pairing. So nice choice, ladies.
Yeah. Whereas with the cab, I think the cab is like gorgeous cab. I think is a little big for it, for the Carmen. It works, but I think I'm finding the Viognier a better match.
I think that what we find with Cheese O'Clock is that people always like one or the other. So what any of us say, you know, to heck with that if someone else has a different opinion.
Right.
But I'm with you too on that. Willie, did you get a chance to taste the Carmody and the Viognier?
Yeah, and I agree. It's excellent. Although I'm also loving it with the red.
Okay, see?
Oh, okay.
As a cheesemaker, how do you think about this cheese, this Toma? What strikes?
It's excellent. It's like you say, it's simple. It tastes like the milk it's made from. That's one of the first things I look for. Can I smell and actually taste the milk that it was, you know, produced from? And I'm definitely getting that. And like you say, it's a very simple cheese. They don't spend a lot of time. And the flavor is excellent. Pairs the wine perfectly.
Okay. Well, so Willie, since you were the last one to talk, I'm going to just go right to you and introduce you. So you are a graduate of the the University of Vermont Cheesemaker program.
Took as many of those as I could.
Okay. Willie worked for a place called Old Chatham, then called Sheep Herding Company, which is exactly as it sounds. It was, and maybe still is, the country's largest sheep cheese making operation. And then went on to another creamery called Maple Hill, and then finally to Coach Farm, before coming to, well, starting For Fat Fowl. Yes, For Fat Fowl, which we will learn about in a moment, why the name, in New York. It's a family operation, which we'll also learn in a minute. But anyway, so Willie, welcome, another formal welcome to Cheese O'Clock. Tell us about For Fat Fowl, and I don't know if you want to start with your video maybe and then go from there.
I'm going to start with the video because it tells probably a better tale than I can, and it kind of tells the whole story. And hopefully I can share the screen and not mess this all up.
Hello, technology. It's always fun.
All right, Selena.
Okay.
I got it.
Bottom. There you go.
We are For Fat Fowl. The first question we always get asked is, what's with the name For Fat Fowl? This one comes from the history of our area in Rensselaer County. The last big landlord here was Stephen Van Rensselaer. That's who Stephentown is named after. He charged all the tenants that lived and farmed on his land rent that usually included some portion of their harvest, but charmingly, it also included For Fat Fowl. This gave us the perfect name for our business, while keeping with the long-standing cheese-making tradition of naming creameries and cheeses after the locality in which they're made. We source all our milk from Dutch Hollow Farm in Stuyvesant, New York. The Chittenden family has been farming in this valley for generations, and the quality of the milk we get from them is top-notch. Local sourcing of ingredients is incredibly important to us for a lot of reasons. First off, we want to support local farms and businesses because it's good for our community. But we also want the terroir of the Hudson Valley, which is so rich with agricultural history, to be reflected in our products. But maybe most importantly, the freshness of the milk we get by staying local and getting our milk from a farm that we know is doing it right is a huge factor in the superior flavor we're able to achieve in our products. The biggest part of any production day involves sanitation. We often joke that we make cheese as a byproduct of cleaning. The cheese-making action is really quite limited to a few hours of ladling, brining, and flipping. The rest of the day is cleaning. We age our bloomy rind cheeses here for about 2 weeks to allow them to fully cover in white mold. Then it's time to wrap them. People often don't realize that not only are we lovingly making each wheel by hand, we are also wrapping each one by hand.
All right, stop sharing. All right.
Oh, that was seamless.
Yeah.
Well done.
And my sister's a better speaker than I am, so I thought the video would fit really well. So I should probably talk about the cheese since you now know about at least the story of our business. I was working for, as was mentioned before, places that make white rinded, soft ripened cheeses. So that was my experience. I definitely, while working for other people, you have ideas in your own head. You're really not allowed to act on them, or sometimes you are. But I always had ideas in my head that didn't fit the place I was working at. And, and you talk about borrowed cheeses. I think everybody who makes a cheese probably has a cheese that they love. And so for me, it was always triple creams. And when I got to Old Chatham, we were making similar things to that. And I just more fell in love with the process. Kept stopping in cheese shops and asking, what's the best triple cream? And people just kept feeding me amazing versions. I really fell in love with Delise de Bourgogne and a lot of the, really famous French triple creams. And one thing led to another as we, decided to start our business. We did a little research and decided, what's the quickest and easiest thing? You don't want to start with a cheese that ages a year or, longer. So we just, tried to focus on something that we could have done quickly and that would be really delicious. And then really we just focused on what do we actually like. And we've kind of kept that our focus since the beginning. So the rule for our products is if we love it, we assume other people probably do too. And so far that's worked. So I came upon this triple cream after months and months of making a lot of just really not great triple creams, rinds that were sour, cheese that was too hard, cheese that was too bitter. I experimented with a lot of cultures and a lot of rennets. What I knew from before didn't necessarily cross over to the new milk I'm using. I'm using entirely Jersey cow milk. I come from goat and sheep farms. So there was a lot of dialing in this cheese. And I finally arrived at a thing one day and, went to some people who I knew would be honest with me and said, try this. And they said it was, excellent. I couldn't get, nobody would tell me it was the best thing they ever had, but they're impressed. And based on that, we decided, let's, be crazy and throw, all the money we have at buying a small building and starting a creamery. And so we wound up starting with one product that was advice from another cheesemaker to try to focus on one thing. And so I arrived at this cheese. And the one we have today is a little soft. This is a batch by batch. This cheese changes a lot. So the one we're having today is definitely a softer version of the St. Stephen. When it gets this soft, I like to peel the top right off the rind. So I take a sharp knife, cut the top right off, and then you can scoop the thing out with a spoon or with a cracker, which is, I'm going to scoop with a cracker.
I'm cracker scooping too.
Mm.
I'm using a spoon.
This, by the way, new cheese, because you are, of all the creameries we're tasting today, you're relatively new in the artisan cheese world.
Yeah, we are fairly new.
Yeah, and it's not easy. People sort of, once the cheeses are on the market, they see them and they're like, oh, that's great. But they don't realize that the idea had to start somewhere, and then the execution had to start somewhere, and then the milk sourcing had to start somewhere, and the creamery had to start somewhere, and all of that. So you kind of, you really built this from scratch.
I did.
Yeah. And so you make, besides St. Stephen, you're making another soft ripened cheese, right?
The Camembert that we call it Camembertha.
Camembertha and St. Stephen. I'm liking these matriarch and patriarchs here.
And then we make a ricotta also called Inagata ricotta.
Called what?
Inagata.
Thanks.
After the song.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, he got it. And then, so are you thinking about making any harder style cheeses?
At some point, yes. We just went through a massive project to build out a former elementary school into our creamery. And it was, I really enjoy making cheese. I enjoy pretty much every part of the cheese business. I do not enjoy construction. So to make another hard cheese requires another aging area. I also want to make a blue cheese, requires another aging area, which requires another construction project. So we're just kind of, loafing along at this pace right now, trying to maintain quality in what we're making now. But I definitely will introduce some new cheeses. So
with your cheese, people often want to know whether to eat the rind. What is your suggestion?
It's a matter of taste. I have people who buy my cheese close to the end of its shelf life, keep it for another 4 weeks and eat that very ammoniated rind and love that. I also have people who will not eat the rind after the cheese is about 2 weeks old. I'm in my own preference. I pretty much always eat the rind. If I'm tasting a cheese, I always eat the rind, but I often will peel when it's gotten soft like this one has. I'll peel the top.
Okay. All right. So first of all, does anybody get butter? No. Triple cream means that you've added cream to the vat in addition to the milk that you get.
Yeah.
To boost the butter fat, to boost the cream, to boost the richness, to boost the everything. And And with wine, well, I was telling you, Dominic, that I've had a cheese like this, not this one, with Chardonnay, with your Chardonnay before, and have quite liked it. I have not yet tried it with the Viognier, but I have a feeling it might work. But a lot of people like a cheese like this with a big red, like the proprietors. So the blend. So I don't know. What do you?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I had the cheese and I immediately went to said, oh, now it's time to try the red. And I did, and I think it's nice. I actually think it probably pairs better for me with the Viognier. And, you know, I went back and forth, and it seems to hit its stride with the Viognier for me. But can I just tell you, Willie, that this is going to be a staple in my home going forward.
Excellent.
This is really amazing,
Thank you.
and it'll make it onto many a cheese platter at the winery. So
Thank you
I
much.
appreciate this opportunity
Excellent.
to
Appreciate this.
go through this with you.
I think the Viognier, for me, the Viognier is the better match. And I think it's kind of a textural thing. You know, Viognier has that voluptuous texture always, that kind of silky texture that I think that is echoed in the cheese. But even better in your Viognier, there is that kind of citrusy backbone that gives it feeliness that I think kind of helps cut through the richness of this very rich cheese.
Higher alcohol too.
Yeah, without that steeliness that your Viognier has, it would be a little overwhelming. It would be kind of too much of a muchness. But I think it helps to cut through some of the fat in that cheese. It's a beautiful match.
It definitely does. Willie, do you have a preference since you made this cheese?
Oh, the wine pairing?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really liking the red.
The red.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's 2 for 2 for the red.
Yeah.
I think you might prefer the red, period, but I don't know. A lot of people do.
It's a very good bottle of red.
Indeed. Indeed.
Creams often have too much salt, or seem to me like they have too much salt. Yours does not, but there seems to be.
That is a constant battle. I like salty cheese. About a third of my customers don't. I have people who I know are right when they call me and say, hey, you've gone a little far with the salt. So I've had to, you have to judge who's telling you, who knows what they're saying. Like when somebody I know who knows more than I do calls and says, hey, your salt's, a little high, or a customer who's been eating it, once a week since we've been open. I know it's time to turn it down.
Well, doesn't the salt get a little bit more intense as the cheese gets a little older as well?
Not if it's salted correctly. You taste it more maybe as it gets older.
That's what I mean. I don't mean that there's certainly not any more in it, but sometimes I feel like it gets more pronounced in a.
Everybody wants to use more salt because it helps with shelf life. It also breaks the fat down a little bit. It gives it a really nice texture. So you don't want like a low salt triple cream, but you also don't want your phone ringing.
Not for that reason.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
It is so great. Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on to our next cheese, which is our old cheese, and our something old, new, borrowed, and blue. This is our old cheese because it's the oldest, not the oldest in terms of how long it's been made, but the oldest in terms of maturity. It's at least 10 months old, and that's our Springbrook Farm Tarantase cow's milk. This is our only raw milk cheese today, and it's our only farmstead cheese today, which means that they have their own milk source. They have their own cows, and that's what makes it farmstead. Springbrook Farm, I have to say, if you asked a bunch of cheese people like Laura and me and cheesemongers to list their, the top 10 American cheeses, I think Springbrook Farm Tarantase would turn up on a lot of lists. It would certainly turn up on mine. They repeatedly win awards for this cheese. It's modeled after the Swiss and French Alpine cheeses like Comte and specifically Beaufort from France. But Comte, Gruyere, Beaufort, that family of mountain cheeses, they are hard. This one is, I think I said, at least 10 months old. They're pressed. They're cooked. The curd is cooked. So that's how you can make this nice compact interior or paste. Here's one thing I love about Springbrook Farm, besides the fact that they make terrific cheese. It's a philanthropy. They make the cheese to fund the philanthropy. And what the philanthropy does is Springbrook Farm brings kids from the inner city, like from New York, kids who've never been on a farm, rarely see any green space. They bring them to the farm for a week for free. And it's a residential program. It's like a camp, except there's an academic element to it. So it's academics mixed with, this exposure to farm life, to rural life. And they've been doing it for, I don't know, 15 or 20 years now. And it's funded by the cheese making. So it's introduced a whole lot of kids to the pleasures of rural life. The fortune that started Springbrook Farm, by the way, is from Miracle Grow, which a lot of you probably have used in your garden. The Hagedorn family that started Springbrook Farm started Miracle Grow, but they turned those dollars into a really wonderful project. Not only great cheese, but the program for kids. So to me, when I taste this cheese, and I'm going to use a cheese plane. And first, when I take it out of if you buy it in a store and it comes in plastic, give it a little scrape to kind of free it up and get rid of any oxidized layer on the outside. You can even just take your knife and scrape just a little bit off the outside, freshen it. It's like that fresh pour of wine in your glass. And then I'm going to give it a shave. And I know what it's going to smell like because I know this cheese like the back of my hand. To me, it's going to smell like breakfast. It's going to smell like an omelet and toast, buttered toast.
It does.
And, a little bit of beefy broth.
Yeah.
A lot of broth.
A lot of broth smell. But I just get that buttered toast, nuts, a lot of nutty aroma.
Yeah.
I get a little onion too.
Raw roasted onions, French onion soup I always think of.
And
Absolutely.
roasted meat too.
And it's funny, you're mentioning all of those things, and it's each one of those is hitting a note that just talks to the Las Piedras. The broth, the French onion soup, the sort of meatiness. That's just right in line with this, and I'm loving it with this wine. So I can tell you that so far we're hitting it out of the park with these cheeses. So thank you again. They're
just really top tier. Laura, I think you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past, but this is one of these cheeses that burns my tongue a little bit. And are you having that same sensation?
Yes, most definitely. There is that histamine thing going on. And some people are more sensitive to it than others. I think you and I are on the more sensitive side to that. But if anybody is also getting that tingling feeling, it does happen with certain age.
Say that.
Alpine style cheeses. Willie, are you getting that too?
I'm not getting it. I've heard customers say it 100 times, and I'm always looking at them like, what are they talking about? All right, see what you're saying.
Customers were getting that, but with soft ripened cheeses, but.
Yeah, not mine. It was the other companies.
Okay. Yeah. And it's just a byproduct, right, of the, a few things, I think. The cultures, and I don't think, you can't get it in a not aged cheese as far as I know, or at least I haven't.
Yeah, for me it's always an aged cheese, often like really aged, sharp cheeses like aged pecorinos, but I'm getting it with the Tarantase. And typically in this part of Eastern France and Switzerland, the Alps, where these cheeses are made, they're consumed with white wine. And often with a kind of slightly oxidized white wine that picks up on those nutty notes. I'm loving it with the Viognier again, and I think it's because of that textural. Got this kind of silky cheese and the silky wine.
Yeah, I'm liking the way too.
You're liking the what? What?
Oh, see, we're flip flopping. That's great.
I actually like it with both, but for different reasons. I feel like the Las Piedras is it's a very meaty combination because the cheese is very savory. And so by the way, this cheese kind of has two seasons. Now the cows are fed the same food all year long, except the food meaning that in the summertime, from actually next week, I think they're going out on grass until November or so. And then the rest is hay from the same area. So it's really the same food, whether it's fresh or dried. But it results in very different milk and therefore very different cheese. So these savory characteristics we're getting are probably from last summer, or last fall or something like that, somewhere 9 to 12 months ago, I guess, versus the winter cheeses, or I'm sorry, we're getting the winter, I think. The summer cheeses are more the pineapple, fruity, acidic notes that you get from the fresh grass. So it's something to look for. And also with the Tarantase, you can tell this is a yellow cheese, but it gets even more golden when it's summer milk. So that's something you can tell maybe the difference between the Tarantases by looking.
You can always recognize this cheese in a cheese shop. Look at this curve right here. This is something you don't see in other cheeses. You see it in Beaufort, the French cheese that they modeled this after. They make this on the wheel by putting this kind of band around it when the wheel is quite young and cinching it. It's kind of like, a corset for cheese. So it has a cinched waist, this cheese, and that's just, it has nothing to do with how the cheese is going to age or how it's going to taste. It's just the aesthetics thing. It's just a look, and it gives it an appearance in the cheese case.
All right. So I think we should move on to the last cheese, which is the blue cheese, and old, new, borrowed, and blue. And actually, what I think, this cheese actually falls into two categories. It is also old because it is at least a year old. And so that's when they sell it. So the they is Hook's Cheese in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Tony Hook has been making cheese for a day or two. Basically, he started in 1970. And for the first 30 years, so, he's had a long career. The first 30 years, he sold his cheese as commodity. It wasn't branded as Hook's Cheese. And then 30 years later, so around 2000 or so, he started calling it by his name. And he and his wife, Julie, were making the cheese and started creating different cheeses. And then this sheep's milk source came along, and that sheep's milk source comes from another highly regarded cheese operation in Wisconsin called Hidden Springs Creamery, which Brenda Jensen is the owner of Hidden Springs and is known for her sheep's milk cheese. She had extra milk, and Tony bought it and started making this cheese that we have today called Little Boy Blue, which of course is, Little Boy Blue. And this is made in very, very much a Roquefort style. He uses a similar mold culture. It cultures and the mold, and then it's a liquid mold, the Roquefort tea, that he puts into the milk along with the starter cultures and gets it going. And then it's all handmade. It's a very small operation with some big vats in it, I will say, but overall it's a very small operation. They do have 4 caves, 2 of which are devoted entirely to blue cheese because they make so many blues. Also, if you ever see Hook's cheddar, 20-year-old cheddar or older, if you're lucky enough to see it, if you're rich enough to buy it, because it's about $100 an ounce or something when it comes on the market. I mean, it's a crazy amount of money. An ounce, I said, not a pound, an ounce.
Yeah.
It's really insanely good, I will say. So he's kind of gotten on the map recently for that cheese, for the cheddar that he's held on to for all that time. And no, it is not green or blue or anything else. It's quite beautiful. Anyway, so the blue is handmade and takes a few days to basically to make, put into the molds, to drain, to salt, and then a few days after it's been made, they then pierce it with metal skewers to introduce air into the cheese, which is what allows the blue mold to proliferate and to grow. Then they keep it in a warm cave for a little while, and then that also allows or fosters the growth. Then they put it in a loose wrapped paper container, not bag. Plastic, not paper, and into a much colder room with high humidity, and there it goes for the rest of the year or so until it's released. And so that's what we have today. So it should have pretty fruity high notes, as I call it, as many Roquefort style cheeses do. Remember that Roquefort is always sheep's milk. By definition, it is sheep's milk. A lot of people don't know that. So this cheese too is sheep's milk. All right, how is it? I haven't gotten there.
Really, and really piquant, really pungent, and big. And I have to remind us all that we're not all having cheese from the same wheel. So, or necessarily even the same batch. So I don't know that we're all having the same experience, but my cheese, first of all, it was very wet when I took it out of the package. This happens with blues, and if this happens with a blue cheese, you just take a paper towel and pat it dry. It's not, it's not a flaw. These cheeses just weep. But I thought it was very big. It's a little bit big for my taste. And Dominic, I think your wines have met their match here.
Well, interesting. Certainly, it sort of blew away the Viognier. There wasn't a chance there. But I didn't experience as much of the pungency as you're talking about. I was actually a little bit surprised that it was a little more subtle than I expected. I think blue cheese can be intimidating for people. It can be for me at times, but this was creamy and lovely and delicious and nutty. And then when I took a sip of the Las Piedras, it sort of just bloomed in my mouth. The cheese, like all these other flavors, just came alive in there. And so it was definitely competing with the wine. But instead of the food pairing enhancing the wine, I was sort of seeing the wine enhancing the cheese on this, which was an interesting thing for me to experience. But lovely. I think it's spectacular.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
So my piece is a little bit more pungent. So I think I would have to go into the sweet wine category, or perhaps a beer or something, because it's a little bit strong. But one thing that Tony Hook said about storing this cheese is he recommends freezer paper, and then or cheese paper, and then wrapping it in that, and then putting it in a plastic container, a Tupperware type thing, because what you want is you want it to you want it protected, but you also you want it to be able to breathe, but also not just completely lose, because oxygen will continue to cause blue proliferation. And so you kind of want to minimize that. So it kind of keeps that a controlled environment. And the same really is true, by the way, for the Tarantase. And one thing I wanted to mention about the Tarantase is that it's a washed rind cheese, as you said, Janet, but it's got this, what they use is something called, it's going to sound terrible, it's called a morgue, but it's M-O-R-G, not M-O-R-G-U-E. And it's basically introducing, what they're doing is they're brushing from oldest to youngest cheeses. So what's on the older cheeses is more of the mold and bacteria, the beneficial ones, that they then introduce to the younger cheeses as they go. And that I call it passing the wisdom down to the younger cheeses. And this is, and as they say, that the Tarantase is really all about the aging. And so, and then they have a whole bucket of that morgue that goes back from day one of cheese making with the Tarantase. So it's really, you can't make that cheese in another place by another person and have that cheese, because unless you steal the morgue. So don't do that. Anyway, just wanted to
back to the blue. Blues are tough. They're tough on wine. They're tough on dry wine. I don't know, Dominic, I don't think you make any sweet wine. Do you? Do you make any?
We have. We're not right now making any sweet wines. There's a time when we made a couple different sweet wines, and they were both from our Chenin Blanc, and it was spectacular. And if you can find one of those little beautiful bottles around, they're amazing. The Moelleux or the Liquoreux. And that would be the wine to have with this. Absolutely, there's no doubt that would be a pairing that would work beautifully. But again, I was surprised. It was an interesting phenomenon for me to see the opposite. I always think of the food enhancing the wine, saying, okay, that pairing that made the wine sing. But it was sort of a moment for me where I took a sip of that wine and the cheese did this whole new thing. So that was really fun. So
here's what I would do if I were having people over and I had this Hook's Lowboy Blue and I tasted it before dinner. I went, oh wow, that's stronger than I imagined. And I were serving your fabulous Cabernet. I would put some butter on the table and some roasted walnuts and some bread for sure. I don't have any bread, but bread is really going to tone down that blue, and the butter is going to tone it down, and the walnut, and that's a mouthful that I think is really going to be beautiful with the Cabernet. So there are ways to kind of compensate when you have a blue that is really strong and kind of risks wiping out your cab. Because for sure, for me, this blue, the fruit in that cab is all gone.
Big cheese.
I'm having it with this perfect cracker, and it seems to be working nicely. So
The power of bridge ingredients. And Janet, I think I would do. I would follow all that up with a dark chocolate chaser. That's what I would.
Why not?
70% cacao or something. So Willie, I just wanted to. So somebody was asking. I think, well, they said, why scrape the rind off of the four fat hens? I like that. Four fat fowl. But I don't think we were talking about scraping it off. You were just saying you should cut off the.
Yeah, for ease of serving, when the cheese is that soft, I often just cut the top of the rind off. Somebody could certainly eat that rind. If there's a rind fan around, they'll eat that, but it shouldn't go to waste. I'm not saying you should cut it off and discard it, but it's just easier to scoop the cheese out when it's that soft. I just always like it's a nicer presentation.
Yeah. And going back to the blue just for a second. So not all blues are alike. In fact, they vary tremendously. There are ones with rinds and ones without rinds. In fact, I might add, next week we have another blue called Caveman Blue from Rogue Creamery. And it's from Oregon. That's where Rogue Creamery is. And their blue is entirely different. It's cow's milk, among other things, but it's got a natural rind, and it's got very different notes than this one, very mushroomy and cave-y. And so that might go, I like the idea, just the thought of Las Piedras, the stones and the caves. It might go really well. We won't have your wine next week, but it's something to think about. So blue cheeses and wine pairing is always a little bit tough, but because blue cheeses vary so much, and of course wine does too, you can usually find a really great match. It's just with red wine, that is. But it's harder. I would say it's a harder match to find because very often I think a blue cheese will make a wine taste metallic, or vice versa. The wine can make the cheese taste metallic. So there's.
Sorry to interrupt. If we could go, since we have you here, if we could go back a little bit to that triple cream.
I like going back to triple cream. No problem.
Endlessly. People, triple creams are a pretty modern style. Triple creams weren't made like in the 19th century, like our, Alpenbonfour and Conte. It's a modern style. And I would love to hear from you what the challenges are of making a cheese like this that has so much, added fat. How is it a different cheese making challenge?
Everything's different. So you use more of nearly every ingredient. Everything takes longer. So protein is what really the cultures act on. It's what the enzymes act on. Fat, it really does not act on. So the fat is really just kind of getting in the way of your pH dropping and your mold, your pieces draining in the mold. You use somewhere around a third more rennet. It's a much harder process and a longer process. It's complicated, and many things can go wrong, and there are so many variables. It is really one of the more risky cheeses you can make because so many things can go wrong. But the nice thing about it is they're wrong within 4 days or something before you put 4 months into it or something.
Now I know in France they have regulations about what a triple cream has to be, how much fat it has to have, which is 72%, I think, or
73% was the standard, as I understood it. The recipe, the idea of the original recipe and why it's called triple cream is it should contain 3 times the fat your normal milk contains. My milk is around 5.2% fat. We're around 16% fat in the mix.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yes.
When we first started, I was making very small batches. I was actually adding more cream than that. And I mean, the pH drop, I could not possibly make another batch of cheese the next day. So it really literally took me 2 days just to make the cheese, and then I could brine it. It was a really, really long process. It definitely was not going to make it for very long. So we came up with different ways. I backed off the fat just a tiny bit. And this was before we'd actually released the cheese. So the recipe I released was the one you have now. And that we've managed to, working with a couple different companies, trying to get the right culture to make this all happen a little bit quicker.
You know, I wanted to just chime in about the, there was a little bit of talk about the rinds, and oftentimes the hard rinds on the harder cheeses, you know, I think we sort of cut up to that edge, and then there's the little chunk that gets left behind for a lot of people. I like to save all those and use them when making a stock, like a chicken stock or beef stock or anything. So, and that just makes everything better. So I don't know if anybody ever does that, but it's just a little trick that somebody who came by, you know, at my house one time when saw me scraping some of that into the trash said, no, don't get rid of that. That's going to make something wonderful.
If you've ever been to a cheese-centric restaurant, they generally have a soup that's made of entirely rinds of cheese, and it's so cheesy, you can barely finish it.
Then you take that.
I do.
What's that, Janet?
You take that cheese stock and you make risotto, and it's amazing.
Oh yeah. You don't even need to top that with Parmesan. Whoops.
Right.
As this Viognier opens up, it is becoming a totally different wine. I'm getting a lot more tropical fruit aromas out of it now that the wine's almost at room.
Yeah, I think as it opens up, that's definitely, I mean, as it warms up, you're going to get all of the, you know, much more aroma, and it's a really aromatic wine. I mean, that's one of the fun things about it. You know.
Dominic, I was going to ask you if you were jealous of Willie when he said that he knows in about 4 days whether the cheese is going to go or not. And you, as a winemaker, maybe not 4 days, huh?
No, you know, winemaking is a long process. No matter what, you're in for a year, sort of, no matter what you're doing. And more often than not, for us, since we're making the big reds, it's 2 to 3 years. So if you mess up along the way, you got a long time to wait before you can do it again. And then if you think about, you know, the planting of the vine and how long it takes the vine to mature before you can get to that 3-year-old Cabernet, you're looking at, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So there's a lot of forward thinking when it goes into making wine, and luckily those vines, you know, last for us. It's about a 25-year cycle if we have things just right up on the hill. Many vines last longer than that, and actually, you know, they can last longer, but are they producing well? Are they doing, you know, everything you want? So there's a lot of patience with winemaking.
Well, it's great to spend this hour with the three of you and all of you out there. It just flies by this hour. It seems like it's not a full 60 minutes. We got cheated somehow, but we're at the end of Cheese O'Clock, and Laura and I would just like to thank Willie Bridgham for joining us and bringing his wonderful Four Fat Fowl St. Stephen, and Dr. Chappellet for letting us taste these amazing, the Viognier and the Bordeaux blend from Chappellet. They're just superb wines. I can't wait for dinner because I'm going to get to dive into them a little bit deeper. So thank you all. And Laura, you want to let them know about what's coming over the next 2 weeks?
I sure do. So next week, Cheese O'Clock is East meets West. So we have 2 East Coast cheeses and 2 West Coast cheeses. And all 4 are really great cheeses. And then the last week is called All in the Family. As you might imagine, it is all family cheese operations, as is the wine that we will be having, just like Chappellet, except that it unfortunately won't be Chappellet, but same idea. And so get the collections now. So next week's might be too late to order, but maybe not. You know, you never know. Those iGourmet people really know how to work their magic if necessary. Anyway, and be sure to post on social. And finally, I just wanted to add my thanks to all 3 of you. To Willie, you're awesome, and your cheeses are equally so, and your little muse in the back, Shalina, your wife, is awesome too, and so she's
how I'm able to do any of this.
Well, I'll bet you she says the same thing about cheese, about the cheese. So it takes a village. And Dominic, you are the host with the most. We can't thank you enough, and for sending 2 unbelievable wines. I wasn't planning to have dinner, and I may not. This might be dinner, but along with that. But whatever, I don't know. Anyway, really, really, really great. Your family, what you do, it's really inspirational and kind of awesome. So thank you for
Thank you so much. Thank you for including us in this. And Laura, I look forward to many more cheese experiences with you. And Janet, it's wonderful to meet you in person, or somewhat, I guess, not person, but virtually, and say hi. And Willie, I'm a huge fan. So,
Excellent. I'm a huge fan of yours now too. I'll definitely be.
and I look forward to us all getting together up here on the property sometime soon. And to those of you out there who I can't see, but you can see us, thanks for joining us and being part of the webinars that we've done and being part of the chat. So keep the comments coming, and we'll keep doing this, and let's do more and more. So thank you all so much.
Good night, everybody.
Cheers.